Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. Scott Gazzoli is the host and creator of the podcast Causing the Effect. He has a diverse background, which is what caught my eye. By night, a stand-up comic, by day, a CPA, and advising families on financial matters that truly matter. He approaches everything he does in a philosophical way, which incorporates mind, body, and spirit wellness. Forget the constraints of the past. It's time to be true to yourself. Scott is the managing director at the Quest organization in New York, a recruitment firm, and I'd like to welcome Scott Gazzoli to Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Wow. Thank you so much for that intro, Jackie. I am not as impressive as you made me sound, but I will take it. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I have a feeling this is going to be a really fun ride.
I'm ready. As long as everybody's ready. Buckle up, people.
Awesome. So as I always tell my listeners, and again, I always want to thank my listeners, and they just make this show happen. I always like starting off saying a big thank you and a shout out to everybody, especially KPPQLP in Ventura, California, where you can listen at 104.1 FM and stream it on my tuner app at capsmedia.org/radio. So we usually begin the show so we know who we're referring to. Tell us your mom's name.
My mother, her name is Caroline. Good old sweet Caroline.
And you were raised in the Northeast?
Yes, born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in Borough Park, which is a predominantly Hasidic Jewish area, which is funny because we're all Catholic. But, my mother grew up in the same house for the last 65 years. I can't leave my mother. I got to watch over her. She's doing this solo. So, I'm close, but not too close, let's say. So she can still pop in, but not pop in unannounced, let's say. So.
Right. Were you raised by a single mom?
Correct. So if you would like to start here, Jackie, I'm more than happy to share just
Sure.
to give some color.
I want to know what your mom experienced and went through.
Sure. So we will start with the story of my father, which I think is, it gives a good background of what happened. So when I was 6 years old, my father was with us till I was 5 or 6. My father disappeared and I didn't know what happened. And, up until about 2 years ago, I had no idea what happened to my father. This story that I'm going to tell you is told by my grandfather, who I met for the first time 2 years ago. So my father, growing up, I thought him and my grandfather were in the coffee business. They were, I would walk into the warehouse over here in downtown Brooklyn. There are beautiful coffee cans everywhere. And I'm like, I'm going to be the king of coffee. This is going to be beautiful. Life is set. They were not selling coffee. They were selling cocaine. And my father went into the witness protection program, disappeared. And my grandfather, who got out of jail, told me this story. And here's the other crazy twist to this. My father put his father in jail. So my father ratted on my grandfather, put him in jail for 20 years. And I found out this whole thing 2 years ago. So quite a story. There will be a movie made out of it. I hope Ryan Gosling plays me or somebody beautiful, obviously leaving my mother to do the bidding. So that honestly made the relationship with me and my mother a lot better because I really never knew. And I think my mother growing up was just trying to protect us because she just kept it very didn't tell me that, but just said, your dad just had to go, basically.
Very vague.
Yes, very vague, very open.
Obtuse.
Yes, exactly. And there is I love my mother to death. She is my number one. We have a tremendous love-hate relationship. So it's very passionate. It's very much like if I called my mother right now and I was like, Ma, I need $500,000, she would figure it out and send me $500,000. But if I told her I'm quitting my job, it would be the end of the world and she probably wouldn't speak to me for a week. So that is a general outline. And I will let Jackie kind of ask any question you want on my mother so we can get more in details about her because obviously I should have listened to my mother.
So did your mom she told you nothing to protect you or she didn't really know herself what was going on?
My mother knew. And even to this day, she won't speak about the situation. I hope one day as we get a little older and she gets a little wiser, she could fill me in. But this piece I heard from snippets from her sisters and from other pieces of the family and kind of all got confirmed the full story by my grandfather. He sent me the RICO case. So I think it's still hard for her to talk about because she never dated anybody, and my father never dated anybody. So I personally think, and since call me a romantic, but I think they were both in love, and this whole thing brought them apart, and they don't want to be with somebody. They'll never admit that, but I think that's what happened. If I had to guess.
Oh my gosh! So let's see. So she's raising how many? You have siblings? You have a sister?
Yes. So I am 32 years old. I am the golden child. She likes me better than my sister. No, I'm kidding. My sister is a cop. I'm about to be a detective. Shout out to Sable. She's 30. She's 18 months younger than me. Yeah. So my mother raised the both of us. And I will tell you guys, it is not easy to raise me and my sister. We were, when I say wild, I mean, we were wild. So, very interesting times, I would say.
Well, it's never easy to raise children on your own, but let alone your mom she had a big secret that she was keeping too, that she couldn't really open. Did she ever tell a priest in confession, do you think?
If I had to, my mother is a very a Catholic woman and very into all that stuff. So I would say she probably told somebody, or at least spoke to a person about it. But I will tell you guys that I've never met a more independent person than my mother. And I can tell you this because she has 3 sisters, and each of them have lost a husband in some way. Two of them did. And, the way that my aunts reacted to it is much different than the way my mother reacted to it. My mother still to this day tells me she doesn't need my help. She doesn't want any money from me. She refuses to do this. And she's really just the person that would give you the shirt off her back. And, it's hard for me because I see my guy cousins trying to help their mothers, and their mothers will lean on their sons a little more. And my mother, I think, really, truly deep down just wants what's best for me. And that is why we can get into a big fight, even though she's erratic or irrational. We could always come back to it because I know deep down she really just wants what's best for me and would literally do anything and everything to get me where I want to be in life.
Holy smokes. So what kind of work did she do, or what'd you live on?
Yeah. So we lived very well. My mother gave me everything and anything I wanted. If I wanted, and I was the type of kid, I was into Power Rangers. I had to have every single Power Ranger. If I wanted a jersey, I went through a NBA jersey phases. I have 465 jerseys as a kid, at 16, 17. My mother is a hustler. She worked her and her 3 sisters, each run a different dermatology office for one of the biggest dermatologists in Staten Island. So there's 2 offices in Staten Island, then 2 in New Jersey. And each sister runs it. So without this woman, thank God, she employs most of the family. They've each been doing this for 20, 25 years. My mother does the payroll, so she pays herself very well. And I'll tell you, my mother hustled and bustled and taught me some ways how to cut corners and, a little bit of Robin Hood action, steal from the rich, steal from the rich. And so I'll tell one story about so my mother, the reason why Walmart and all these people can't deliver packages over $500 is because of my mother. So my mother had some finagling that she did. She would order one TV from Walmart and just say it didn't come. Second TV from Walmart. She would get the second TV and I would stop. I would say I'm not that type of person, but I would do the one TV. My mother would get the second one and still say she didn't get it. Get the third one, say she didn't get it. So very much that way, but always never like a bad, like stealing from a kid or stealing from a person. Like always she was like, listen, Walmart, they could handle it. This place, they could handle it. Amazon, they could handle it. So very interesting. She really gave us everything we wanted. Wow. The way my mother worked with me was, I guess, a little bit incentivizing. So she said, I want you, if you go to high school, I want you to go to this high school. If you go to this high school for free, I'll get you your first car, whatever. What do you want? Okay, Mom, that's nice and easy. I could do that. College, the same thing. So very smart with how she incentivized me, at least. And I would say for me, she was this was an issue that we had growing up as teens, is she was much harder on me than my sister. So my sister can get whatever average she wanted. I had to have over 100 average in everything I did, which made me a perfectionist. It made me have a little bit of anxiety, but in the end, I do understand why she did that now, because I guess, my ceiling was a little higher. She saw a little bit more in me. And, I did take a lot of those standardized tests that said I was extra smart. So I think she just wanted what's best for me and like really pushed me on the like every night from I would do basketball, do football. I come home 8 o'clock and it would be a half hour of index cards, spelling bee and math bee. I won 4 spelling bees in a row. I won 6 spelling bees in a row. So we pushed and my mother was extremely happy. All I wanted to do up till about 4 years ago, all I wanted to do is make my mother happy. That's really like was my goal in life. And, I got to a certain point in my adulthood where I said, well, Ma, there's just, what you want and what I want are a little different. And I got to start living my own life. And she was a little bit, I got to pull that out of her. But I think in the end, she sees that my path and journey is just a little different than most. So.
Wow. So wait a minute. I got to go back to this whole A's for you and your sister not so much.
Yes.
Why wouldn't she want her daughter to be a super rock star and smart and a business owner and entrepreneur?
Yes. And she wanted Sable to do good. So I'd say the threshold that she wanted Sable to bring home like an 87, 90 average, which by no means is bad. My sister was a B+ student, A-. Sable was a wild child. She was the one getting called up by the principal. My sister would give the principal my number and tell her I'm the father, and I would pretend and that whole thing. So Sable was a little bit more of a rock star, like on that way. When I was 13, I took an IQ test and I ended up getting a perfect score in the city. Then they make you go to the state, take another test. I got a perfect score. So I think my mother, that was probably the worst thing that ever happened to me because that put it in her head like, he's special. Let's try to make something special out of him. To give everybody an idea of how it was picking a degree. If it was up to me, I went to college. I really know what I wanted to do. Mom, I'm thinking about psychology, maybe philosophy. Oh, Scotty, what are you going to do? You're going to work at the philosophy factory. That's not what's happening. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, or in finance. You pick. And I was like, Ma, I don't think I want to. No, you're doing it. So the only reason I have, I got 2 BSs and an MBA. And the only reason I did that was because I saw finance was 4 years. You can get MBA in 5 years, and being a doctor was 10, and being a lawyer was like 7. So that's the only reason I really ended up doing what I was doing. So there is some control there. There's probably a lot of control, but I think for the right reasons. And again, I will say it again, I do love my mother. I think she really does want what's best for me. It's just more got to be her way sometimes. Those were some struggles. Don't
you think your sister was acting out because she wasn't getting the attention that you were getting?
Probably. Most likely. That was the case. And I think that was more of my mother was still learning how to do this whole thing, really much by herself. She lived, so my mother lived on the top floor. She had her parents living underneath her. And when me and my sister were 12, they both died within 2 months of each other, which I think shook up my mother, shook up just the whole family. And honestly, we've never been the same since then, and a couple other deaths. So yes, that was definitely why. And, if she had older Scott here, Mr. Philosophy and Psychology, we could try to talk to her about that. But, she did what she did. My sister, me and my sister, nothing is very easy with finding your passion, but I do think my sister loves what she does. She's studying for the detective test now, and I'm just happy that she could be happy. And, my mother, my sister wasn't easy because telling an old school Italian woman that your daughter is a lesbian, she had a freak out, and then I had a divorce 3 years ago. So by no means does my mother get what she wants at any means too. So it's not easy for her either to give her a break.
She sounds like a survivor. She's going to do whatever it takes to take care of you guys and put food on the table and live the way she wants to live. So that's a lot of information, Scott.
I told you. I tried to warn you.
Which is fantastic. So you're a mama's boy?
I am a mama's boy. So like literally me and my mom were a team growing up. She was like spelling bee, math bee. Listen, when I would win, it'd be great. When I didn't, she would shit on me, whatever, all that stuff. That was tough, but like football. So I was a big football guy. I was going to play college football at Rutgers University. Signed my letter of intent. My mother was my number one fan. So my mother won more awards on my football team than me. Just so everybody can get that straight. Top salesman, top encourager, like just one of the, like she was hilarious. So love supported me through that. If anything kind of lined up with the norm, my mother supported me when we really, so once I told her I was leaving a hedge fund, I'd really like to give you guys how much of a mama's boy I was. I was like, Mom, what do you want me to do? That's really the way I kind of looked at life. I didn't ask that, but so I know my mother wanted me to make a lot of money. She wanted me to marry a nice Italian girl with money. And she wanted to have a nice job so she could tell her friends. And I was 26 and I did all that stuff. I was making $1 million at a hedge fund. I married a beautiful Italian girl. I had a good job. She could tell her friends, blah, blah, blah. And I started to really get sick, physically sick, ulcers, and just a lot of weird stuff. And I was not the person you're talking to today that's a little bit more self-aware. I was not living my life. I was living the life that my mother wanted. And I guess the life even society and the cultural norms will tell you to live. And having that conversation with her, like, for example, telling your mother, I'm getting a divorce. I think most mothers would react differently than the way my mother did. So I left the house that I was living with my ex-wife in, and my mother would not let me go back to the house. I had to live in a hotel and all that stuff. So very much like when things don't go her way, she just has a very weird tendency of pushing everything away and like really trying to force it back. And that was tough. And I'd just say her reaction to things are still a little abrupt, but I sort of get it knowing how old school she is.
Okay. So she had this plan for you, this whole vision of what a perfect life would be. And you put all your ducks were lined up and you checked everything off for your mom, but you weren't happy, clearly not happy. And then she just shut the door on you and said, you're out.
Exactly. And this is like a theme that my mother does.
Oh,
so this first happened.
Goodness.
Yeah, this is the first happened when I left the hedge fund. So I am classically, as Jackie said, I'm classically trained accountant, CPA, CFA. My resume looks great, but I hate it. I'm not built that way. When I would tell people I'm an accountant, they're like, what the hell? Like I'm just not that person. I'm a personable guy. I want to chat. I want to bullshit. And when I told her I'm leaving, same thing. You're not leaving. You're out of the house. Blah 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 blah. Now she still does the same thing. I just don't listen and I just don't care because I know she's gonna text me tomorrow. So it's more just like I've learned how to deal with that by now. But yes, that is the way my mother kind of was for most of these big things. And through that, I think it is good in a way that I was so much of a mama's boy that I was kind of leaning on her too much. And I'll be honest, I may even lean on her too much now for certain things, but it did teach me how to like give the belief and confidence. Like I can do this by myself. Like I could start a new business. I could leave my things and I could live my own life, my own uniqueness, and all that jazz.
So at a young age, you have this failure, if you want to call it, or this realization, maybe it's probably the best thing that happened to you, that you had all of this money and the marriage and the Italian wife and the list goes on, but you were clearly unhappy. So you go into this dark or different place. You step out of your box. Did she ever come around? Did she ever express compassion for you or act like it didn't happen?
No, my mother's definitely come around. So I would say with the job has definitely come around. Like my mother will never say, Scotty, you're right. Like, she's, and listen, very supportive in a way. Like if you saw my mother's Instagram and her Facebook, it's me everywhere. Scotty, I love blah, 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 blah. But she'll never say, it's like, she always thinks like you need to be a CEO of a hedge fund or something like that. Like, but when she saw how happy I am and how I built a business with my bare hands. I make double the amount of money I was ever making. I'm really living a certain life that I've architected. She came over when I said, wow, I'm so proud of you. I can't believe how you kind of created this. It's really kind of mind blowing. Now the podcast, she was like, what the hell you do with the podcast? And now she's like, listen, she gets a little mindset action. She's like, wow, there's some stuff I can really work on. So she's definitely coming around. I think with the romantic relationships, I think she's just like, Scotty, I got to just accept like, your time will come when it comes. She's spoken to this supposedly with my aunts who were, they said, they've kind of told her like, listen, you got to let him do what he wants. I think one day we'll be married again. It's just not, I just kind of see it just more happening more in the future. So she's come around, but still, I think deep down, like she'll send me, she says me, she still tries to incentivize me, Jackie. She's like, sends me Harvard Law School. Just take the test and I'll pay for you. Just become a doctor. And if you pay for a doctor, I'll get you a car. I'm like, Ma, these things don't work anymore. I have a lot of money. Like you can't. So I still think she tries.
You can't buy me.
And I think that's something that's a good point, Jackie. Like she really, the way it was growing up was a lot of materiality. A lot of, well, if I stream at you and then I just buy you a bunch of shit, that'll solve it. So as equally amazing as it is in the material world and how great the emotional side of my mother, I still haven't seen, and I don't know if many or if anybody has seen that, honestly. So,
wow, isn't that crazy? It's kind of, and I've spoken to another of my guests where the mom kind of creates this tornado energy. She sounds like is she a perpetual motion woman?
When you say that, what do you mean? Like always moving around?
Well, emotionally, at least, if not physically. Or does she chill out and breathe?
No, my mother's always moving and shaking, like always trying to buy something. Like she's lucky enough. She works, 2-3 days a week. She doesn't have to worry about money, and she'll just go buy stuff. I'm going shopping. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. But still, she's been able to sit the majority of her life by herself, which it saddens me to even say that, but I do think she has some peace with that. But as far as emotions go, my mother, I've seen her cry like twice in my life, over deaths. Anytime if I brought up these things I talk about, like on my podcast, I do a lot of philosophy, a lot of psychology, a lot of like my issue is not saying it's passed down, but feeling things is more my problem, and particularly with women and that stuff. So when she hears me talk about it, she's like, "What are you talking about? You're fine. You like it's like the typical old school attack. Just push it down and figure it out. Like it'll all." But I'm like, "Mom, I'm trying to like discover this whole thing because I'm just left with I got to figure this out." So she's like, "Oh no, I don't know what that stuff is." So I think the emotional side is something that could have been better.
This old Italian tradition.
Yes.
Right. You don't open up necessarily. I'm Italian as well, but my mom was way ahead of the curve, Linda, and that's why I do this podcast.
Good job,
and
Linda.
She was a health nut and alternative energy and therapies, and she was oh my goodness. And it was very important for her and for us to always have beauty around us. And I'm not talking about having riches of beauty, just whether it's fresh flowers or beautiful colors or artwork. That's who she was. So that's all man, that, and I'm very lucky. She's right here in this picture of my studio.
Oh, so she sounds like the opposite of probably a very emotional woman.
Well, especially when my father passed away, none of us ever think we saw her cry, which is amazing because her spirituality, her belief is so strong that he was always right present with her, regardless if he was physically present. So she never doubted her spirituality. And she believed that he was in heaven and he was happy and safe. So she wasn't an emotional person, but she was extremely sensitive and compassionate. I mean, obviously, when we were being raised and there were 7 of us, there was craziness in the house. She certainly lost her temper from time to time, but we were nuts.
I'm with you.
We were nuts, but we were also really good. I mean, we never, went to jail or anything. Thank God.
Thank God, right? Thank God.
So, yeah, it's just interesting, the dynamics. And yet, I'm proud of you, Scott, because you pursued the things that you are passionate about. You incorporated all of that, even though she wanted you to do the financial stuff. You did the philosophy and the psychology, and I think that's really important. I think that's great.
And listen, like I have come from a family of philosophers and psychologists, and they tell me, even though I'm like, I wish I would have gotten, I went to Oxford and did this. They tell me like, listen, you don't realize it because you're always used to having money. And if I would have went to this path off out of 20, 21, 22, my mom was very much more this, what we're talking about, like your resume. My resume looks amazing. The GPAs, all this craziness that caused some stress and anxiety. Like I don't want it any other way because it gives me opportunities that I cannot even imagine. Like I talk to people, there's 52 billionaire families in New York City, and I'm responsible I talk to 40 to 50 of them, 42, 43 of them on a monthly basis. So I couldn't get here today to have this comfort, to have this thing, to be able to expand my mind this way if it wasn't for my mother pushing me. So I do understand that. And even I think we've come to like an agreement, like I did my job, you're doing what you want. I've accepted that because now she's very, if people check my Instagram, the first comment, Caroline Gazzoli, my mother comments, she gets it. she tries to get it at least. So I think it's a good medium of having, and even like that's the way our relationship is. Like it's a balance. Like my mother and I will have an amazing month together. And even through my divorce, like it made us closer because I saw, who my mother really was after that. Like she really stood up for me and helped me with the divorce and all that stuff. And, even though she didn't let me live there for 2 or 3 weeks, like once it kind of hit her, like this is real, obviously she always came back around and, still could always call on her for anything. So.
Right. Well, moms always worry, even though they say they don't worry, moms worry. So I'm assuming she was worried that your future wasn't going to be as she had envisioned it. So I guess she needed some time to adjust to the situation and the shock. I'm sure it was a big shock to her, to all of you involved. But being a mom is really, really hard. And especially because she raised you guys on her own. And I really just applaud her for that.
Yes.
Not an easy situation.
Not at all, especially us. And again, we didn't go to jail either, but we had enough, I got some speeding tickets, may have got myself in a little bit of trouble, but like that reaction that you're talking about is it's giving me goosebumps because that's like I see it. And it's like my sister, she's not a spiritual person, but my mother would make everything like if something bad happened, Ma, you gotta see, something happen. It becomes the biggest thing and it becomes the worst thing. And it's this blown out of thing. And I see that with my sister. And I even saw that with myself in my marriage. And that's something that I've worked on. So even by seeing what not to do in a way, I've kind of learned how to compose myself. And like, even for my children, like I know I'm going to be a great dad because I could kind of see where my mother made that. I know I try to take the good from everything and just, I'll just adjust the bad parts. So the good of repetition, consistency, showing up every day, blah, 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 all that good stuff that goes with that self-development. That's why I attribute that masculine energy to my mother, because she really made me, I have the confidence that you give me a process, you give me a situation, I can figure that out. That's more that the masculine energy, the yang, that's called, that would be the color white, right? Then there's that, the feminine energy, the yin. That's more my issue. The anima is called in psychology, being able to really feel things and be like emotional. That's something that, I'm aware of and I'll work on it. I'll bring that forward to my children so they can have both.
You know what I find, and it's interesting, I think if we step away from whether it's a conversation or a conflict or something, we just step away and breathe for a minute and let it be absorbed, whether it's a sudden event or someone just said something to you or something just hits you. Instead of opening our mouth right away and having the wrong thing come out, perhaps it's better to just take that beat or that pause and let it resonate and think about it. And then we all may have a different reaction, a different response.
Absolutely. And that is what I've done.
Yeah,
that is my new tactic. So
it helps so much. And I'm the same way, we're human, but it really seems to make a difference. And we're always learning. I'm always learning. So.
Yeah, that's exactly the way. In my marriage, I was always the guy like, let's fix it now. Let's fix this now. And I learned just by going to therapy and this work and stuff, like just taking that step back. Because, if you're a person that's naturally conditioned to get that way, it's not good. And you're going to say things you don't mean, you make stuff worse. So now I just kind of take a step back, and it's really just nice that to have a little bit better conflict resolution, I guess. So it's helped me, just be a better person, businessman, person, cousin, family member, everything across the board. So.
Yeah, all aspects of life. I want you to give Caroline, your mom, a big hug from me. She sounds amazing.
She's listening to us. She was like, Scotty, what kind of pictures do you need? You need me to send pictures of you? You want me to Jackie? Who's Jackie? So she's listening. She's shout out to Kat. You're the best, Mom.
Scott Gazzoli, thank you so much for joining me on Should Have Listened to My Mother. Scott is the creator and the host of the podcast Causing the Effect. And he's also a stand-up comic in the evening. So go check out his podcast and look for his name in case you're interested in going out and seeing some good comedy. We'll have to talk about that the next conversation we have, Scott.
Jackie,
okay?
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. Such a different take. I love this niche that you're doing. I think this is so important for this kind of stage we're in life, where people need to kind of dig deeper into themselves and go back. And I was a little nervous for this conversation because it's easy for me to talk about this, but I know it's hard for some people. And I hope, more people can kind of get in touch with their feelings, particularly people who aren't as emotional as I'm working on it, but some people are, it's harder than others. So.
Well, thank you very much. I'm so glad we got to meet.
Thank you.
And we will be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother.